headlining the show, but we are going to now turn our attention to Bledisloe. Bledisloe 2 this weekend, but we'll just have to look back on Bledisloe 1, considering what happened as well, because obviously this weekend it'll be Eden Park where they play it back, New Zealand versus Australia, but last weekend in Perth the story was all Wallabies. It was magnificent. I'd say Cheika was delighted watching it.
It was like I teleported back to 2003. There was a full stadium in Australia to watch a rugby match, full of gold, full of a great atmosphere, and they came out and played gorgeous attacking rugby. They had a lovely balance to their team. James O'Connor gave them so much from 13.
He looks such a 13 for them. It's been hilarious.
I was just noticing it, that there's a classic 13 in the mould of Brian O'Driscoll, who's creative but not quite a distributor, who can take a line on but also offload the ball, who opens things up and catches the eyes of defenders and is truly the link between inside and outside. Like, he's in that mould. That's the kind of player he's trying to be, the Brian O'Driscoll mould of player. And it's a while since you've seen a 13 like that. They used to be everywhere, but now the 13s tend to be very rudimentary. They're either one thing or the other. And James O'Connor is looking a bit of everything now. It's early days, obviously.
It's only one test, obviously.
But he was fantastic.
Yeah. It's the first time I've been excited about an Aussie midfield partnership in quite a while, because Karevi's obviously been on fire,
knocking them away like Skittles,
literally bowling them over, and that lovely balance that's potentially there. It has a kind of shades of, if you're talking O'Driscoll Roberts Lions combo from 09. Lovely subtle touch, in like the subtle touch of the 13 creating space for the big man in a 12. And then with Beale slotting in at fullback and Lele Fano and Genia, but now Phipps as well, presenting another option at 9. He was really good actually as well.
Yeah, there you go. You mean Nick White?
No, not Nick White. Sorry, not Phipps.
Phipps. Yeah, I was about to get alarmed.
Phipps. No. Nick White. Sorry, offering another option there. Their backline has a bit more balance than it has in years, and even with Folau there was always a topsy turvy. Off balance.
It was always just about Beale and Folau,
and
what Beale and Folau could do, and exactly. So now it feels like they're without the fulcrum of Folau, they're trying to make it about everybody. I still think Beale is a very crucial attacking point, because even no matter what else is happening on the field, Kirtley is a stalwart.
The try he grabbed towards the end was an awesome line, and he has free reign from fullback to find those holes, he's great at them. He went in untouched.
Probably better at fullback than he is at 12. He's a little unshackled a little bit from the distribution role. He can still come in and do it, but certainly the creativity of O'Connor frees him up a little bit to play in those wide channels, and you forget how effective he is.
For sure,
not at 10, but in the wide channels, in the tram lines, doing that show-stopping work, and it was outstanding. The offense of them was outstanding, and so too were their locks, and I would say all three locks. Adam Coleman off the bench was massive, and Arnold and Rodda, who you had been critical of, were both huge.
They were huge today. I'll give them credit when they're due. The scrum stood up as well, and that's a lot of their drive too. But around the park, even Arnold had a lovely touch in it for Loto's try in the corner, the little 2-on-2. It was Arnold took it to the line, got the hands free out, and got the man in, and it was great. Lovely subtle play from the inside forwards. And to be fair, looking at their pack now as well, like their scrum was excellent, but also just looking at Loto, who scored that try from 6, a big wiry kind of guy. I know you don't love him.
I don't love him.
I know you don't love him, but I'm just looking at the way the pack's orientated, and I'm like, this is a bit more Aussie, all right. I can see these guys linking in the wide channels, setting a 2-on-1, getting the offload away, picking the pass, and then like. If a Wallaby side are orientated that way, they can find tries against anyone.
They can,
and that is what we saw this today.
It's the recipe for success that we sought, and they can be such a difficult team to get a read on. It's all been very messy so far. Kurandrani and Karevi in the middle, and obviously that opening day against the Bok B team, where the same locks were just bowled over by Eben Etzebeth and company, and. A part of that is just how bloody good South Africa are and how much depth they have, and then another part of it is that the Wallabies were looking that good. And you're right to point out the scrum. Their starting props, Scotty Seo and Alan Alatoa, excuse me, are fine scrummagers, very good scrummagers. And a little worried about what's in behind them, but their first up can match anybody seemingly. That said, I think we have to talk about the other side of this game's coin,
which is the fact that the All Blacks were completely and we will talk about the red card, but Australia were getting on top of this game from minute one. They were sharper, more physical, more playing the game in the right areas, not infringing with anywhere near the same inconsistency that New Zealand were. And talking about combinations, like New Zealand really just don't seem to know where they're at the moment at all. Lemape was on this time around, and we saw a different centre partnership.
Came on off the bench.
Did he come on? It was Linnert Brown started. Sorry, that's right. I was picturing the tackle later on that he had to make. But Linnert Brown and Goodhue still there as well, and we're all just a bit of a jumble hodgepodge in the middle of the field. The Barrett Mo'unga axis did yield one lovely try late on. Barrett took a line off Ritchie that was excellent, and it kind of got them back in with 14 men.
Barrett, there's a lot of criticism obviously at the new shiny thing is to blame. That there's a lot of criticism going on about the Mo'unga Barrett comparison. Why do we have our best 10 at fullback, etc. I think Barrett's a lovely fullback. I think Barrett's the best thing about this team, and I don't think Ritchie's too far behind. I think it's everything else. Frankly. Obviously, without Retallick, they struggled a little bit for that physicality, but it's the physicality that they've made a name for themselves on. It's since 2017 they have moved away from being the All Blacks that won the last World Cup. They've moved away from being that show-stopping, try-scoring team, and have tried to be more functional, more bludgeoning, a sort of test-level Crusaders who are going to blitzkrieg teams and out-muscle them and outwork them. But time and time again, we've seen the picture of it not working. We've seen South Africa shut them down in offence because they're not as potent last year in Wellington and get some defensive tries off against them. And even that, the All Blacks still managed to score some tries, so it's deteriorated since then. Against Ireland, you saw a baffling pick-and-jam style game that they played against Ireland, the most capable team out there dealing with that. They didn't get a thing off. The Box last week as well. The Box do have a great defence, but the All Blacks got one play off the whole game.
They barely got anything off against Argentina as well, and ended that game defending their own line for dear life, and praying for the whistle, which saved them.
They're picking Rico Ioane, who's out of form at the moment, but he's still probably worth his place there.
He was very soft on defence now, I thought. I thought he was a bit absentee-ish on a lot of those plays. You're right in saying he's out of form. He looks a bit sluggish.
He's not what an All Black winger... I know he has been, and this is why the temptation would be to put faith in him, because he has been that electric player with ball in hand. And then on the other wing, you've Ben Smith, who it's sort of sacrilege to say anything bad about, and I kind of agree with it, because he's rugby lore. He's one of the great players of all time. But right now is not playing well at all.
No, he's not.
He's all over the place. He looks slow. When he gets the ball in a bit of space, he's not making anything happen. He's just not looking like Ben Smith.
He's a few plays passing him by. Like he came in at one point to intercept something, and it hit him on the back of he just got turned around, and he was all over the place, and that was nothing amounted from it, but it's just rare to see him coming flying in without knowing fully where he's at.
He's not adjusting that well to his diminished pace, and that Reece Hodge try at the start of the game, if you watch that back, what Ben Smith does is just baffling. I mean, he's coming from deep. There's a wide pass. Australia are in possession. There's a wide pass that's nearly intercepted, and the Wallabies just get outside it, and the ball gets to O'Connor's hands. And Ben Smith, from covering basically at fullback, there was no fullback covering, comes flying into the line, buys a dummy from O'Connor on the inside, and just gets completely lost in the play.
Turns around and trips over his two covering forwards out there as well, and sets Hodge free.
Yeah, O'Connor just pops it back inside to Hodge then once Ben Smith is gone, and Hodge runs in for the try, and it was a great play from O'Connor and a part of this brilliant Wallabies attack, but it was poor from Ben Smith, and that's not something you're often saying. So they got to find themselves right now. Kieran Reid not doing it right now. Sam Whitelock not really doing it right now. Brodie is when he's fit, but he's not fit right now. And so it's a headache for them, and they should absolutely start TJ Perenara every game at scrummy as well.
I think so too,
because he's a defensive weapon as well as everything else.
They started two sevens. They started Sam Cane and Ardy Sevilla in the flanks, which some would say are 2 sevens. I actually think they're not quite the traditional open side that you would want in there. I think the only one they have in that mould is Matt Todd, and maybe he's not quite at the level either, because certainly what they're missing compared to the team that won the last World Cup, there's no McCaw and Kaino in there at all, and they
got rid of Shannon Frizzell.
They got rid of Shannon Frizzell.
Cut him from the
I thought he did a grand job. I really do think that in this back row, what they're asking Reid to do most of the time, because like when Dane Cole starts plays as he did here,
Oh, by the way, Dane Coates is still great.
He's still awesome.
He's still brilliant.
He operates in that wide channel, which is basically the role that they had Kieran Reid doing with ball in hand in the last World Cup. Now you see him more often one out from the ruck, hitting it up. Kieran Reid, yeah. He's not in that wide channel, which is where he operates his best work, and his best play of this game was a restart play where he batted it down for Lemape and they nicked that try after the Aussies had just scored one, which is a great play, and he's super athletic.
More athletic than physical.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't understand why they have him doing that grunt work when he's not actually that effective at it, and I think it's because they're missing Jerome Kaino.
Yeah, they haven't filled that jersey at all.
No,
and playing the 2 7s in there and ditching Frizzell is no solution because it forces Reid to take up a job he's not acclimatized to doing. And
the balance is just all off in that back row. But similarly, the centres, now, Sonny Bill has played a bit of more Mitre 10 Cup. He's going to come back in. The rumour mill has that he will start in Bledisloe 2 coming up. They need him playing some spectacular footy for them because at the moment their midfield just isn't working.
The media has finally caught on and is laying into them as only the Kiwi media can do to their rugby teams sometimes. Like, we think our media is bad, you think Australia's bad, and most of the time you're right that the Kiwi media is pretty chill, but then the All Blacks start to go on the wane and they just lay into the team. And I wonder if it's time to start pushing the emergency button and starting to get these boys back to do a blitz camp and do it now in terms of getting the ball skills up, making sure that we can execute 5-on-4s when they're on.
Yeah, kick return tries when they're on.
Scoring tries. What's the game of rugby about? Scoring more tries than the opposition. That's the All Blacks that won the last World Cup. And I'm sure that they can find a team that's talented enough to be the All Blacks. But right now, they're playing like a Northern Hemisphere team and they're not actually as good at it as the Northern teams.
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. You saw it in Twickenham last year when they nearly won, and it was England kind of let them get out of there without getting the beating they deserved. Ireland did no such thing for them the week after, but it was a very similar picture. And South Africans are demonstrating for us as well. And now with Bledisloe, the Wallabies showed us a different tack where it's exactly that approach. What is the game of rugby about? Score more tries than the other side.
And the All Blacks, where usually they just revel in those kinds of games. I mean, the Wallabies have got plays off them before, but usually they played out some classic games. Do you remember that game with Barrett back into TJ on the inside after the Wallabies took the lead on 77 minutes? The All Blacks came back on 78 with that TJ try.
Yeah.
And that was what they were. They were just the team that was going to find the try from anywhere and everywhere. And they're so out of practice with it. They're playing such a more functional game that they're just not right. And it's time to get them playing that attacking footy. Get Sonny Bill and his offloading game in there. Get Shannon Frizzell back.
Maybe get Ben Smith out of there if you're sticking with Bodie at 15. Who's missing, notable for his absence.
Get him in there.
Yeah. Even the Crusaders, the guy Sever Reece has been grabbing tries from the wing. I think he's more the form winger than either Rico or Ben Smith, to be honest, because Ben Smith was playing 15 for both All Blacks and for the Highlanders this year, and now he's been thrust in on the wing. He's not quick enough to play wing.
No.
So
and Barrett's
either you're going to drop Richie Mo'unga, put Barrett back to 10, and then pick Ben Smith at fullback, which I think can make sense too, or you stick with what I think is probably a preferable option, which is Mo'unga at 10, Barrett at 15, doing a very Ben Smith role from there. Certainly on defence, he covers a lot of that.
Karevi Perps aside, but I don't know if Ben Smith's making that tackle either. I don't think so.
Karevi was in full monster mode. He was absolutely Jonah Lomoing the All Blacks up that touchline.
He was not to be tackled at that point. I agree with you. I don't think Ben Smith is in form enough to pick him. And listen, it pains me to say it, and he still remains one of the great players. But right now, you got to be. This is what the All Blacks are. Like, Doug Howlett becomes top try scorer, and then at 25 you're done.
Yeah.
This is what they do, and Ben Smith isn't at the level right now, and there's just a little too much levity around the guys who've been there for that long.
Yeah. Your Sam Whitelocks, your Kieran Reeds, your Ben Smiths.
Yeah.
Very tough to drop them, but are they doing the job?
Well, that's the thing, is that the worrying thing is who's coming in behind us, and I guess we can round it up by talking about that red card decision briefly on Scott Barrett. I mean, what a clueless play from Barrett.
Yeah, there's no controversy on this podcast. By the letter of the law and by the guidelines that were released, it's a red card.
Yeah,
and it's an automatic red card. You can look for mitigation, but looking at the incident, I actually see more aggravation than mitigation in it. I'm looking at a guy who there's no attempt to bind. at all. He's dropping a kind of forearm,
Drops
shoulder
elbow,
thing,
really.
elbow really into the head of a player who is being tackled, but you're standing upright.
It's open space, and he's all the time in the world to not do what he's doing, and he does it. And there's a lot of people who don't think it's a red who haven't, like, I feel like I'm going to have to say this a lot over the next month or so when the World Cup is coming up. There's a video that World Rugby released, I think, at the start of May, which is important for people who want clarity around this area to watch, because it offers that. And it's about 11 minutes long, and it details like how exactly these things are officiated. I'm not going to go into the full minutiae of it, but
it's worth watching. And you get the impression, just even listening to the commentators on the game, even the Aussie commentators were like going like, oh gee, it's harsh, and I'm like, you're going to colour the discourse by saying it's harsh. It's not harsh, just watch the video. And it's actually by the letter of the law, that is what the decision is. That's what it's going to be at the World Cup, so it's important.
They have a very clear decision making framework around it, where contacts to the head are initially decided as a red. Contacts like that, you find out if it's a high tackle or a shoulder charge. In that case, it was a leading with the elbow straight to the head
with force.
Is there mitigation? The guy's dipping kind of, but there's open space. He's done it with force. He has time not to do it.
He
and
himself
chooses
is
to do
upright
it
in his body position in terms of entering the tackle.
There's just no way it's any other decision, and Garcés got that one 100% right. And folks who are critiquing it haven't seen that video.
No. Also, this interesting little tidbit on Garcés: he has now given away exactly half of history's history's red cards against the All Blacks. Half of them have been given by Jerome Garcés,
and the other half by all other referees.
That's mental.
It is a bit, but I can't speak for the other ones. I don't exactly remember them, but in this instance, he's correct. He's correct.
Yeah, and just officiating the way it should have been, and it did cost them. Obviously, they couldn't live with the way the Aussies. One thing that changed.
They started losing that forward battle that they really wanted to dominate.
Yeah, well, one thing that happened was the Aussies just stopped kicking it. They had a few exit plays in the first half that were kick related, but they just played from their own half the rest of the game and just wouldn't give them the ball and ran them around and played exactly as you should play. 14-man side, pulled them this way then that, and eventually picked them apart. And
they were loving it.
It was wonderful to watch.
They were up for a game of high tempo trans-Tasman footy, and the All Blacks were not there for it.
No.
And got duly spanked.
Yeah, and Perth got treated. The Perth factor, they got treated to an absolute classic of a game.
I mean, listen, I don't live in Australia, but some things are obvious, and Perth is rugby country. Western Australia is rugby country. Cutting the Western Force from Super Rugby was a really cutthroat and silly move, and yet they're still supporting it. The Western Force is still out there playing in the NRC, and it's an awesome rugby town that's actually filling stadiums, and a 60,000 seater.
Full
awesome stadium,
singing and loud.
Optus Stadium. They were loud. They were It was like I teleported back to the start of the millennium when these games were everything that they're built up to be, and this one truly was.
Yeah, and congrats to the Wallabies. Great to see some proper Australian footy and putting the All Blacks to the sword.
What do you think is going to happen this week then, in the interest of previewing the next game?
I suspect. Yeah, well, we're looking at Eden Park this time around. Probably a bit of a backlash of some kind. I'm just looking for a repeat of some form from that Aussie pack and backline. I want to see them similar levels of commitment and focus, because like you said last week, when the Wallabies beat the All Blacks, and they have done in this cycle, it's always about discipline and real focus. And it would be very disappointing to see them back up a performance like that with a bit more of a wishy-washy.
You can bear in mind, I think it's 2000 and it's early aughts since they won Bledisloe.
There you go.
That's what's on the line.
And it is on the line. They keep it alive, because if they lose this game, obviously it's retained and that's game over. But they have a chance. They have a real chance. And for the first time in years, the All Blacks look rocked, vulnerable, very vulnerable. So
that said, I've never known the media to tear into the All Blacks and not to get a backlash.
Sure.
And hopefully it arrives. You talk about focus and discipline. You have to imagine that the All Blacks are hitting the tackle bag something fierce this week, and are going to come out with all of that. The Wallabies can look unfocused, and then this week looked brilliantly focused by comparison, and you might see a reverse of that from the All Blacks. I'd like to see them do Kappa Pango. They haven't brought it out yet. They've done Kamite 3 games in a row and have played poorly by their standards in all 3.
Interesting.
Let's get the team written haka. Well, that's always what they do for big games. Maybe they're saving it for the World Cup, but whip out the Kappa Pango. Let's make it a big game.
For sure. Well, as they were professing to care more about Bledisloe than the tournament, and now Bledisloe's on the line. So you'd expect a big counter performance from the All Blacks. Don't expect to see the same same kind of looseness that they had in the first half. But what I'm really hoping for is just a proper contest, like classic Bledisloe game. I want the Wallabies to travel and turn up and actually perform. It would be very disappointing if ends up being a blowout, which historically speaking you'd think it would be if the All Blacks were to be caught cold in Perth and then have to come back. They'll tend to dish out a backlash, so that's probably what the bookies would say is the most likely. But I'd love to see a one-score game and a proper contest in this.
We don't know, but it would be nice. There aren't too many games left for Australia, but it feels like they have a nice balance to their side, and it could be a very useful performance. And a victory, an actual Bledisloe Cup victory, it would be massive for them.
It would get them right back in track. Where for the last 4, it would very much hurt New Zealand. It would make them a wounded animal going into the World Cup. Whereas the Wallabies need a little bit of something, a bit of momentum to spark them into life come this side of the World Cup. And listen, that James O'Connor at 13, what a find! Because Karevi Kurandrani was not working.
He was better than anyone could have hoped coming back into that side. You know, they'd heard buzzes about him. He's a different man. He's changed, but like to slot in and look like such a natural 13, like for a guy who's played 10, 15, wing, 12 everywhere, and then he comes in and he just looks like a perfect 13. Hopefully they can keep it going, and as you say, focus is key. When they look unfocused, that's when they get really loose and terrible.
And coach-killing errors, so you'd hope to see only few of them and a proper competitive Bledisloe too. Let's have
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please like down below and subscribe for more videos. And please enter the comments section to join our conversation. Thanks.